Reading online reviews when you're shopping for a new product or service can be incredibly helpful, but only if they're real. Knowing what to trust was a genuine problem long before AI slop came along, but now more than ever, if you're a company behind one of these products or services, how do you build trust online in the age of AI? I'm Jennifer Strong, and this is Shift.
Now here on the steering column is a device called Auto Cruise. You simply set the speed you want.
Self-driving robo-taxis are already on the road in U.S. cities.
As the disc rotates, a mirror reflects the light in the way that depends on how the signal was recorded.
This is the 100 terabyte action. I present to you Electro, the Moto Man. Ladies and gentlemen.
I would say that one of my greatest skills is my ability to interact with humans.
This episode, it's the latest installment of our oral history project. A cluttered desktop isn't just an eyesore, it wastes mental energy, slows down your Mac, and hampers focus. With Clean My Mac, you'll boost both your Mac's performance and your productivity by easily identifying and removing large, unnecessary files, including cache files. Clean My Mac finds outdated files that can be safely removed, so there's no need to worry about losing important documents or photos. Decluttering isn't just about speed, it's about creating an environment that helps you work smarter, not harder. I make a real mess of my machine with all the audio files that go into making this podcast and others, and the Smart Care feature ensures my Mac stays in top shape. With one click, you can free up RAM, manage processes, and even check for malware. So deep clean your Mac, scan for potential threats, and boost performance all with one click. Experience Clean My Mac for yourself. Try it free for 7 days and use promo code SHIFT to save an additional 20% on your purchase at cleanmymac.com. That's cleanmymac.com, promo code SHIFT. This episode is brought to you by Tools and Weapons, the podcast exploring technology's impact on our changing world. Hosted by Microsoft's Vice Chair and President, Brad Smith. Across 3 exclusive conversations celebrating the company's 50th anniversary, Microsoft's CEOs Bill Gates, Steve Ballmer, and Satya Nadella share the untold stories, big dreams, and relentless drive that's fueled a digital revolution. Hear why each of them thinks that the revolution may be at its most exciting point yet. Find the CEO series and other impactful conversations with government, business, and cultural leaders by searching for Tools and Weapons, wherever you listen to podcasts.
If you ask any business person how important is trust to your business, they will almost universally say it's incredibly important. It doesn't matter whether the business is big or small, which country it's in, what vertical it's in. If you then ask a follow-up question, how well do you understand trust? How well do you understand, how deeply do you understand whether your customers actually trust you or not? I find it remarkable, that disconnect between how important people think it is versus how rich people's understanding of it actually is. So I'm Adrian Blair. I'm the Chief Executive of Trustpilot. We are the largest independent customer feedback platform in the world. The thing I'm really passionate about is trust and building trust, particularly in businesses around the world in the age of AI. It depends how far you want to go back, but if we do a brief tour of, I guess, trust from, let's say, prehistory to the era of AI, trust started out as being all about communities and who you knew in your community. So reputation mattered, and it was conveyed through word of mouth. Then obviously you had the era where brands started to become a thing, and the Industrial Revolution, you started to have brands forming. We went in 20th century, post-war, we went into the era of conveying brand through mass media like TV, but it was still very much sort of one to many about how great they were and how trustworthy they were. We then saw with the internet the explosion of what I guess you can think of as distributed trust mechanisms. So, many to many people talking about their opinions, people sharing their opinions on different businesses. The issue with that is twofold. I think one is that it's very hard to know what is actually real and what's not when there are just a multitude of voices. I mean, if you think of, social media platforms today, it's just a cacophony of voices. You get people with a lot of followers who suddenly have a much louder voice than everybody else. And it's really hard, just as a sort of average consumer to figure out who can you really trust here. Equally, it's hard for companies. How do you engage with all that as companies? How do you actually make sense of it? There are whole businesses made out of just helping companies to understand what the hell is going on across like social media platforms and everything. So where Trustpilot came in is trying to bring some sort of structure and organization to that chaos and say, okay, we're going to put a huge amount of effort into making sure that the feedback shared on our platform is actually real, that you can trust it. And we're going to make it easy for businesses to actually engage with that feedback and understand it, because people don't want to shout into a void. They want businesses to actually pay attention. So you can think of us as being about helping people have a voice, but also make a choice. Have a voice, make a choice. So, how do you actually look at all the feedback other people have left and use it to make a decision? And that's why we see something like 89% of people use online reviews routinely when they're making a buying decision. Now, of course, bringing it up to the present moment, we've got AI that is making things sort of harder and easier at the same time. So I would say it's making things harder in terms of knowing, that cacophony of voices is even louder now. There's even more of it. It's even easier to just, generate reams and reams of spammy content and whatever. Therefore, it's all the more important to have a trusted place, to have a repository of like valid, genuine human experiences. We have some great data scientists at Trustpilot. When I speak to those people and I say, look, net, is AI helping or is it hindering what you do? Overwhelmingly, what I hear is it's helping. So AI for us, for our business, it's creating some problems out there in the world with knowing what you can trust. But for Trustpilot, AI is a massive positive. Let me talk about why that is. So if you think about a review, you go onto Trustpilot right now, you express your view of an experience that you've had with a business. Now, before I worked for Trustpilot, if you'd asked me how many bits of metadata describe that review that you've left, I would probably have said, well, there's the time of day, there's the location, there's the operating system you wrote it on. Maybe there's like 4 or 5 different things that describe that review. Now, actually, in fact, and this is one of the things I've learned since joining this business, we have hundreds of different metadata points that describe just one review that you've written. There's a whole long tail of different aspects of your review. How long did it take you to type? How much of it was cut and pasted? What language does your operating system actually use as its native language, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can go on and on and on. We have a repository because we were founded in 2007 and we've got 190,000 new bits of feedback coming onto our platform every single day. We have a repository of over 300 million reviews on our platform. So just think how much data that is, hundreds of metadata points about just one review, and we've got 300 million of them. What does that mean? It means that when a new one comes onto the platform, we can do a huge amount with AI to look at patterns in the data. Let's look at the pattern around the data of the one that you've just submitted. Let's compare it to all the other ones out there. Let's look at all the ones in the past that we've thought were fake for whatever reason. And let's use all of that to take a view in the moment about whether we should actually allow something onto the platform or not. We're getting better and better at that all the time. So last year, 2024, we removed 4.5 million reviews from the platform, and 90% of those we remove with technology before they even hit the platform in the first place. So we're getting better and better at detecting this content. And of course, the valid comparison is between everything I've just described and pretty much nothing at all that you get on most social media platforms, right? So they'll have minimal stuff about, don't do anything illegal or really dreadful stuff that they try to take off the platforms. But when it comes to actually, is it fake or not, they're not doing that work, right? You've got to try and make those judgments yourself as a consumer. The business was founded in 2007. I'm the chief executive, but I'm not the founder. I joined the business actually a year and a half ago. My background is all in technology companies. So I was for a long time at Google. I worked at Spotify. I was with a food delivery business called Just Eat, which acquired Grubhub Seamless in the US. So it might be more familiar to your listeners in that guise. I've also worked in accounting tech and health tech. So I've been knocking around in technology across different verticals. The thing I'm really passionate about is what you can do with technology to actually address everyday problems that people have. That's what got me so interested in Trustpilot. I've actually been using Trustpilot for years myself as a consumer, as a business person. It is not so well known in the US yet, although the US is our fastest growing market. But in Europe, in the UK, Denmark, where we were originally founded, increasingly Germany, Italy, and some other countries, it is extremely well known. So, virtually everybody in the UK, for example, where I'm sitting right now, will know about Trustpilot. So I'm really passionate about helping people understand which businesses they can trust and give them a voice as well, like help them get their voice listened to when they've got feedback on a business.
The world's hardest problems can't wait. Food security, energy resilience, the digital divide. I'm Astro Teller. For 15 years, I've worked with inventors and engineers to tackle the seemingly impossible. In the Moonshot podcast, we take you inside X, Google's Moonshot Factory, giving you unprecedented access to the messy, exhilarating journey of turning science fiction into reality. This is the Moonshot Podcast, out now wherever you listen.
What we can see is that certain types of business, like for example, we see a huge amount of banking businesses on Trustpilot. We see a lot in cybersecurity. We see a lot in logistics, package delivery. But we think there's still a long way to go in terms of different verticals in the economy which need to understand trust more richly and more deeply. And the first step in that journey is actually ask your customers to leave feedback. So if you've got 50,000 customers or 1 million customers or whatever the number is, ask them what they think. Send out a Trustpilot review invitation to them. And why should you do it through Trustpilot? Because it's a trusted platform where the feedback actually lives out in the open, in the wild. There's a whole industry in businesses around this thing called NPS, Net Promoter Score. People send you NPS surveys, they ask you to fill out your feedback. That's all great, but the problem with it is it sits behind closed doors. It's in captivity, it's not in the wild. If a business tells you our NPS is 50% or 90%, so what? No one ever put that in their ad, right? Whereas on Trustpilot, it lives in the wild. It's out in the open. Anyone can read it and engage with it. And that's why people trust us. And if a business asks us to remove feedback because they find it inconvenient, we say, no, sorry, we don't have a delete button. The feedback actually belongs to the person who wrote it. And, people don't always like that, but that's how you build trust, right? That's why people trust the platform. So I think it's just so important that businesses try to enrich their understanding of what people think of them. There's a huge amount of insight you can get into the world by actually trying to understand that feedback using AI. And that's the kind of thing that we're doing with TrustLayer. And what we're finding is there's all kinds of businesses who are interested in engaging with that. It could be investors, it could be consultancies, it could be social listening companies, it could be, specialists in a category who want to really understand the different players in that category. So we're finding that there's huge interest in this review database that we've got, well beyond the actual direct participants in that database, if you see what I mean. I think the way to look at it, again, if we try and take a bit of historical perspective, before 1929, the Wall Street crash, there wasn't a lot of regulation about financial statements and what sort of thing you could do with financial statements. That had a devastating impact on the economy, and that was one of the causes of the crash and all the consequences that followed. The SEC and regulation around what you have to do with your financial information was really, really toughened up. And that's, of course, been a good thing for the world. Why was that? Because everyone appreciates that financial statements are a really important thing, and you've got to treat them right. Now let's contrast that with trust. So I mentioned earlier, 89% of people rely on online reviews when making a purchase, particularly an important purchase. So people are relying on this sort of content day in, day out to decide where to spend their hard-earned dollars. Therefore, it's important that it's actually legitimate, that it's actually correct information. And what we're doing everything within our power, whether it's with technology or working with regulators or working with other companies who also care about this kind of thing. We're doing everything in our power to actually make sure that the review content that we host is valid and useful. But I think what folks can do is if you're running a business, make sure your business is squeaky clean on this stuff. So, an example, one thing I sometimes see business owners doing is they will try to ask a customer first if they're happy, and only if they're happy will they ask them to leave a public review on Trustpilot, right? Now, we can all see why you might want to do that as a business person. It's known as cherry picking in the trade, but we can also appreciate why that's wrong, right? It's wrong. It's misleading a consumer. Like if my mum or dad goes onto onto Trustpilot to check out that company, that's not good. They're cherry picking only the happy customers. So we go to great lengths to try and spot companies when they're doing that. But, if you're running a business, that's not the kind of thing you should do. Or getting your employees to write reviews, getting your friends to write reviews, incentivize, paying people money to write you positive reviews. Like, you just shouldn't be doing this stuff. It throws grit in the system. Now, what's great in the US is the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, has a whole set of guidelines around fake reviews that essentially echo a lot of what I've just said, these common sense principles of like things you shouldn't be doing. And they actually have financial penalties attached to that, which I think is great because it's saying, look, just like you wouldn't tolerate any messing around with your financial statements, you shouldn't mess around with reviews either. And actually now if you do, you're creating a real financial risk for your business.
This episode was produced by me and Emma Cillekens and mixed by Garret Lang, with original music from him and Jacob Gorski. Thanks for listening. I'm Jennifer Strong.
From PRX.